Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Toolkits discussion. No two banking apps are alike. My name is Megan Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of Digital Max, based out of Berlin, Germany. And today for this panel, I'm joined by Katrina Elliott, product manager of Penta, Quincy Hunt, former global head of product management at IG, and Derek Smith, head of digital solutions, CIO, Virgin Money. Welcome, everyone. So in this panel, we will get the perspective of the incumbent, the challenger, and the non-bank financial institution. The first question I'll ask is around the meaning of digitization, and I wanted to kick things off by sharing a few thoughts on this. Over the last 9 years, I've looked day in and day out at digital banking and fintech products, apps, and experiences. In the beginning, I researched exclusively just what the consumer sees, and my analysis was based purely on this perspective. But over the years, as I worked closer with banks and at a deeper level with early stage fintechs, it became clear that while consumers may use features that appear digital, they're not really truly digital. Mired in manual back office processes, subject to manual interventions, these journeys were merely digitizing specific journeys. While this, of course, is okay for some journeys within the banking or broader financial services experience, the real winning experiences are driven by a truly digital experience, from back to the middle end, all the way through to the front end. And a part of creating this truly digital experience is using the right APIs at the right time in the right way. In today's session, we'll look at the use of APIs in helping to create a truly digital customer experience. So I'll start off by asking the panelists what digitization means to them. And as I introduce each of the panelists, if you could give a quick intro about who you are and your role within the organization. So let's kick off with Quincy.
Well, first of all, hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. As Megan said, I'm Quincy Hunt. I am the former head of global product management for a company called IG. IG does investment tools and products, mostly in the CDF space or CFD space. And my role is really to manage a product team of professionals to create the best, most delightful products for our customers. So that's pretty much what my role was when I was at IG at the time. So just circling back to Megan's question, really great question. And I think this whole concept of digitization means so many different things for different organizations. And it really depends on where the organization is in its life cycle in terms of if it's newly adopting digitalization or if it's somewhere along the far down the curve in terms of really maturing in that digitalization space. But in the context of this conversation, for me, I really think it's how we create the most frictionless experience for our customers in a way that automates processes without having any kind of human intervention or interaction with it. And all of that starts with obviously understanding your customer, understanding what their pain points are, and seeing where you could automate or digitize some of those processes within it. So it really depends on the organization, but for me and where we are in the stage of our organizational growth, that's where I see digitalization and what it means.
Great, thanks for that, Quincy. And I mean, from your perspective, is it complete automation, or do you think there's some experiences where a human touch really goes that extra mile in creating a great customer experience?
Yeah, I think we just need to be really pragmatic about the approach. So there are different ways that we would approach this. So, for example, if we have high-value VIP customers, there are some elements of human touch points that need to happen between that customer and the organization because it's a high-value customer and they need a different type of service. They want to interact and engage with a human being. So in that particular respect, the engagement is not necessarily digitized. Maybe the journey to get to a human or get to somebody to speak to is digitized or digitalized. But it really depends on the scenario of what type of scenario or situation we're trying to address, to be honest with you. So it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's really understanding the customer and then what you're trying to address or solve as the problem.
Super. Thank you, Quincy. And Katrina, what are you up to at Penta, and what does digitalization mean to you?
Hi, Megan. Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'm the product manager for the cards and expense management features at Penta. So Penta offers a small bank account for businesses, for small businesses across Germany. And we also offer additional services. So we have a platform approach where we have partnerships with different fintechs. Customers can apply for loans within the Penta platform, and they can also manage their expenses. And we have integrations with accounting providers as well. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting question about digitalization. I actually think the changes in the last year due to COVID-19 has forced the pace of digital adoption to accelerate. We all know the choice of different finance services has been pretty huge for a while now. And to stand out in the crowd and truly solve the big customer problems, it almost always means going beyond transactional banking. So into the more advanced features and for customers to get their end-to-end financial help within one service. I think the ones that stand out are offering adjacent services that fit their USP. So for example, a small business owner can apply for a lockdown relief government loan through their bank account, or accounts with aggregated capabilities. So being able to connect all of your accounts into one transaction list, still keeping the categorization features and the receipt upload features on top that you're already used to. I think these are the apps that are going above and beyond and delivering on the digital expectations. As you mentioned, I think it's really important not to just mirror the in-person process one-to-one, but to use the advantages of the device that your customer is using.
Cool, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, I think it makes total sense, specifically, within the SME space. It's so important to be able to, shed minutes off, the day-to-day banking experiences and overall financial time that SMEs have, and those little, or creating truly digital experiences in those, micro journeys, for example, receipt capture or better transaction view. I think it's, crucial to SMEs, regardless of market.
Yeah, exactly. And the bigger you get, the more automation you need, the more important it really is.
Cool. Thanks, Katrina. And Derek, could you introduce yourself and let us know what digitalization means to you?
Yeah, of course. So, hello everyone. My name's Derek Smith. I head digital solutions at Virgin Money. So that means what that means for the kind of broad digital term. As I head up engineering, solution architecture, and analysis across all of our customer and colleague web and mobile channels. What digitalization would mean for me? So I think the way I would look at it is in terms of how we transform and build digital products, we want market leading capability for building product experiences and journeys that kind of excel and exceed our customers' expectations. Now, within that, I think then you need to focus on how do you transform your ways of working? How do you get your teams really focused on customer and business values and have every outcome based on that? And then how do you create the underlying modern engineering, architecture, and processes that enable those services? And I think it was what Quincy said, bringing that back, then what does that mean? Well, I think you need to look at where do you want to be as a company? What's your USP for customers? And we've got things that look at how do we optimize an experience-led relationship that ties in with the Virgin Group. So that could be travel, hopefully again in the future, could be wine, media, and how are you creating an open and optimized digital architecture that allows customers to engage and experience all of those services in a seamless way. And that again, to your point, I think at the start, Megan, means it's far deeper in the stack. How do you pass data? How do you access services when there's loads on different parts of your architecture? How do you optimize that so for the customer it's a seamless front end experience? But how do you optimize everything under the hood to enable that?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think it's pretty cool. You're in a great position being part of, the whole Virgin experience and in a prime position to go above and beyond and, provide experiences that touch upon all parts of customers' lives from the digital experience. So yeah, going above and beyond just the traditional financial services perspective. Okay, so let's jump into the next question. So this panel is all about, what the toolkit looks like. So it'd be good to get the panelists' perspectives on the tools that are needed to build a truly digital experience. So, what does the process look like? How important are sandboxes, open APIs, webhooks, any other tools that are integral in the world of today building these experiences? Katrina, let's kick off with you.
Yeah, sure. So, well, firstly, I think whichever tool you choose, it comes down to availability, functionality, and speed. So a truly great digital experience means the customer doesn't actually know what's going on in the background, how many different APIs are implemented. For example, if you're an accounting provider and you let your customers initiate payments from their bank account, it has to feel natural and within the context of the experience that they're used to on your platform. So any API really needs to support this. And of course, sandbox are really key to delivering a smooth product without errors, and every other type of tool that's available.
Cool, thanks. And Derek, what about from your perspective, from the, incumbent point of view?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of pieces. There's obviously, yes, optimize your use of APIs for closed and open, depending on the use case. But what I would say is, again, sandbox can be used in multiple ways. One of the things that we're trying to do is kind of learn from institutions. So we've created a sandbox, or are creating one, with about 10 fintechs, where we want to go way past the current open banking APIs and way past like fractional payments, and open up as many of our services as possible and have that as a kind of a closed playground at the start with a subset of fintechs. And as we co-build services, then expose them out directly to customers. Now, I think the reason I say that is that's not just a sandbox for testing a proposition. We're trying to go far beyond that, way many layers of our APIs and services, and have that kind of common playground, but then it allows far greater co-creation. But I think thinking about those toolings, thinking about what's the purpose and how you're trying to learn. So don't just create APIs, the minimum of what you need. Try and go a few stages forward in the proposition and how you do ideation, and then use those toolings to try and help you get there. And again, we're looking at that to support marketplace offerings, intelligence-driven content, ties into energy saving, etc. So we've got a number of kind of strategic OKRs and things we're trying to enable, and then using some of that tooling to get an ecosystem that helps us develop those propositions and challenges our thinking on how we do.
Okay. And just a follow-up question. So you mentioned kind of open and closed APIs. I guess when you're dealing with legacy technology, is it hard for banks to choose between open or closed, and kind of what is that, what's the thinking around using the open or the closed APIs?
I think in some ways it's a cultural piece of banks being used to direct, secure connections. So I think there's definitely a place for them, but what I would do is try and get my engineers and the architects always design open, so for performance, for availability, for standardization. But there may be use cases where you want specific high secure connections, you don't want completely open. So I think design for open in terms of use, but there are still use cases for close and high security.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And yeah, Quincy, what are some of the tools you're using to build your experiences?
Yeah, so definitely agree with what my colleagues Kat and Derek mentioned in their responses. And if I was to prioritize the top 3 tools that need to build really great digital experiences, these are my top things: data, data, and data. And the reason why I say that is that you really need to understand your customers before you go down this journey of starting to build an experience just for the sake of digitizing or making it digital without really understanding what their pain points are, what are the challenges they're facing, what is their long-term objectives that your customers are trying to achieve. And the only way to really get to that point is by understanding your customer, by using the data to look at the insights you get from that, the information you get from your customers, and then create an environment, an ecosystem, an API, or whatever you need to kind of create that development cycle by having those things qualified by the data you support or the data you collect from your customer. So I think that's the most important starting point, by understanding your customers, being really specific about what their needs are and being deliberate about delivering on those needs. But the only how you can do that is by using and leveraging the data within your network of existing customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, key to accessing that data and using it at, the right time in the right way for the right customer, that really creates that kind of, seamless end-to-end experience. Quincy, would you say that the quality of available, toolkits and APIs meet the demand for these types of services?
Yeah, so I mean, there are tons of tools that are available in the marketplace. There are tons of different API support products that you can use to help you build out your APIs. And it doesn't really matter what tool, or I should say what doesn't really matter, but it doesn't really matter if you use a tool that is from, vendor A or vendor B. What you need to start with is understanding what is your long-term objective, what it is that you're trying to build out or serve your customers with. So if you're creating an API to allow your customers to make, or your partners to make a call into your platform to see an account balance, for example, you need to understand what is it that they need to go through in that journey that eliminates the friction that they have today to reach that outcome. And based on understanding that and based on understanding how they operate and the journeys that they take, you then decide on the types of tools that you want. Because there are tons and endless of tools that you can integrate with and partner with in order to facilitate that process. But I think it really boils down to how well do you understand your customers? How well are you getting those insights to make those decisions to then get the right tools in place?
Yep. Okay. Thank you for that. And Katrina, from your perspective, how are the existing tools and APIs holding up against the demands that you have over at Penta?
Yeah, I mean, I think quality is a very important question for the fintechs because, we're on the front line dealing with the customers' responses, with any potential negative reviews, and sometimes without much power to change, because we're really building our features based on what others have built. So I think it can be really tricky if, the cultures between two sizes of companies are very different between the vendor and the fintech. I think the quality is driven by the vendor also truly understanding the end user and having the APIs used in practice and then improved iteratively. So, if you're the first company to integrate an API, then you have the advantage that it's more likely to be tailored to you and your customers' needs, but most likely it won't work 100% right from the beginning. So your customers are essentially going to be the QA for a new product. And then if it's an established existing product, then many others have already integrated it, but the flexibility might be less than you'd want for your customers. So I think these are all important questions when it comes to quality. On top of that, I think infrastructure setups means that the pace of releases can be very different. Fintechs releasing multiple times a day. If you don't have a release one day, it can be often a sign of a problem. If you're working on an older infrastructure, then the banks especially tend to release much less frequently, and this can also affect the perceived quality and the pace of the demand for the fintech as well.
Cool. Thank you for that. And Derek, I guess what's your perspective? Having a a more, inclusive sandbox, a marketplace, so working with different types of fintechs. Can you talk us through kind of how you assess, the toolkits and APIs you use and how these are meeting the demands of, both your organization, but also some of your fintech partners?
Yeah, so again, it's probably similar to Quint said, and like Megan's point, the toolkit I think is probably less important to me. It's the performance and the access to appearing as a green face to me. So what we would be looking at, I think, is taking the learnings from the kind of early phases of where we had open banking architecture, where sometimes that was too tightly bound to the rest of the bank, and that had an impact on the APIs, had an impact on performance. So how do you segregate that it's in an optimized architecture for access, for performance of use? That's some of the things we've been trying to do to try and be that better provider into the market, because I think when we're looking now at the next stage of being far more open, we've really got to think ahead of saying, okay, what is the support model for that? How do we interact with people to optimize it? And probably to the point of saying, not to design it just for the first person using it. So we're trying to look and say, okay, let's do at least 10 wide use cases of how this marketplace of APIs could be used, and let's try and design for that. Now, you will always have a first set of features to enable, but try to think forward, try to challenge yourself on open data overall, not just open banking or open finance. How could that be used? And think through some of that in your design. Now, you'll need to iterate it, but try and think forward of how users will use this in the future when you have multiple users, multiple access points, different versions, and try and design for that. And then select the tool that can enable that. And then what I would do with any vendor selection is try and get real true life testing of it and engineering and release updates and really test out the tooling, see how it scales, how it improves, and how much bespoke versus off the shelf it gives you for your solutions, and then make the trade-off on that strategic view, readiness now, and then how it will evolve with your needs.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that, Derek. Yeah, so, a lot of short, medium, and long-term considerations. And I guess, sticking with that kind of thought process, Derek, I mean, what would you say is the difference between a good API and a bad API? And do you have any kind of examples of when a super good API was used or maybe a not so good API was used? And any learnings you can share from that experience?
Yeah, I think if we go to that piece of, is it accessible? Is it standardized? Does it give the access you want? And where we've seen challenges in the past of, is that piece of you build for one partner and then it doesn't version control right, so multiple people can't use it as it evolves. So how do you keep it standardized and concurrent access? How do you keep it performant? And that's where we've seen those challenges where sometimes it's built for the first partner, first customer, and then the security protocols, the access points just aren't scalable or have a wide range of access enough. And I think that's definitely learnings we're trying to take. So yes, for uptime, yes, for support once it's in, but that piece of how you try and do multiple tests with multiple types of people accessing it from day one, I think is really important to try and really build in resilience, but to build the value of it. Because it's lots of the rationale for having a marketplace is having a good API is that marketplace or ecosystem development offering that it gives on both sides. And I've seen far too many that are built for one or two use cases that don't then scale. So trying to get that into your design up front is what we're trying to do now, and learning from mistakes that we've made or we've seen with other partners.
Yeah, so it seems that scalability is definitely key. And Katrina, I mean, what's your experience? What's the difference between a good API, a bad API? Any kind of learnings or anecdotes you can share with us?
So, I mean, I'm looking at this from a purely product perspective, and I think there are two main things. So getting set up quickly is often, really important for a fintech and to meet their demands for feature releases. So excellent API documentation is one thing that we always look into first. So I think the effort that vendors put into doing this right once, and then making sure that it's always maintained, always accurate, it brings many benefits for both the partner who's integrating it and the vendor. API documentation should be written in a language that everyone can understand. So, the product managers who are really aware of the customer problem, they can really understand if this API can deliver against further use cases that the vendor may not have even thought of at the beginning. And it should also include real life use cases and guides to get started. And then more importantly, once live, following on from what Derek just said, a good API, ideally, we'd have an uptime of above 99.9%. There must be health monitoring, meaningful error messages. So, it doesn't mean much if you can innovate a lot, but if your customer reviews are really unhappy because they've had a buggy experience and, you're not aware of the errors that they've seen because the error messages are not meaningful, then I think this really can push something from a bad API into a good API with the better error messages.
Thanks for that, Kat. And Quincy, what about from your perspective, good API versus bad API?
Yeah, so at IG, we do a number of things to make sure that our APIs are in good shape for our end users. And some of the key tenets we look at is making sure that it is a very simple API that could be understood across different individuals or in different sectors who may be programming or developing in different languages. We want to make sure that it's secure, of course, because if there is any experience where there's a breach, being in a compliant and regulated environment, that could have serious consequences for us. We want to make sure that it's stable, of course, because obviously this is going to impact on the reputation of how great our products or services are. It's also important for us, Meg spoke about having a certain amount of uptime. For us, it's also important to have a specific response time. So in the investment community, the response time of your products goes a long way in terms of determining how good your product is and how successful you can be in invest in different types of products. So that's important. We also want to make sure and try to make sure that our documentation is very structured. What I mean by that is a consistent structure throughout the API itself, so that way people are not trying to understand different types of structural components about how it's coded. And last but not least, but I think still very important, there needs to be proper definitions across the different API elements. So in that, there should be at least some sort of glossary or dictionary that clearly defines what each interaction is doing or what each element within that API is supposed to deliver, whether it's a response or whether it's supposed to be a call for some sort of information. And I think having those type of things would be great. To answer the flip side of what a bad API is, I think in absence of having any of those elements, especially in our community, investment community, we would consider a bad API, and I think our customers would probably think the same way as well. That's kind of how we work and we firm out how our API should look and operate.
Okay, thank you. So it seems that, scalability, good documentation, clarity are kind of keys to a good API experience. Okay, so next up, let's try to think in terms of what would I tell my younger self, or what would I tell someone over coffee or a beer who's embarking on, their digital transformation journey within financial services, thinking about toolkits and specifically using APIs. So Katrina, what advice would you give organizations who are new to working with APIs?
So before any integration, while you're still doing the provider research, I think it's important to answer some questions, about do they cover all the use cases that you will need. I think it's important to understand their business case and what's their roadmap, what drivers really prioritize the feature development. So, if they're really focused on revenue or on the number of customers that you can provide to be using their APIs, will you be able to have a say at the table when it comes to them prioritizing the next features that they will build? So I think this is really important to have a great partner relationship. Of course, to do the technical investigation. So they should enable your developers to test the API in a sandbox environment. The sandbox environment should really mirror production. I mean, this is like really, really key. And then, can they scale to the number of customers that you're expecting? This is, also something really important. If you imagine any downtime or any scaling down of the experience, if you reach a number of customers that's just too many for them to handle, this is another important thing to research at the beginning.
Okay, thank you. And Derek, what would your advice be?
Yes, I think kind of aligned. Yes, sorry. Oh, right. Yes, I think it's probably similar to what we'd said before. Definitely looking at the product roadmap for the company. So does it hit the hygiene factors of what you need to get started? Yes, but I think that's kind of just that should be an entry ticket, right? So the piece we mentioned, does it standardization, does it help with access, does it help you with monitoring, you all those points. Then getting sight of their product roadmap and how they prioritize that. How do they develop? Do they develop for the customer base highest tier, or is it a open platform that you take off the shelf, but you have an equal access to that roadmap? So understanding where they're going, looking at market trends for the future of that type of tooling and what you will need, and challenging and understanding their thinking on that and how they can support you to try and make sure it's future-proof, because it's often easy to kind of solve for today, but does it give you that future roadmap and you have confidence in their development capability and their product development, so it'll be the toolkit that you want to use for years.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely. So, kind of future proofing is key. And Quincy, what advice would you give to, your younger self or any organizations new to working with APIs?
Yeah, I definitely agree with my colleagues. I think they covered off most of it. The only thing that I would add is really just to get a very clear understanding of their focus and their strategy. So you want to make sure that whoever you are partnering with or aligning with in terms of using their APIs is going down the same direction as you in terms of their strategic intent. And an example of that is if you are very heavily focused on your customers and your customers' experience, does that align with an organization who is more focused on technology development and just making sure that they have, tech that's developed that supports automation, but really doesn't allow for them to really manage customers in the best way possible? That wouldn't really align with what you're looking for from a partner from an API perspective. So maybe something that you may want to consider some more and really take a deep look at before you engage in any kind of relationship or partnership with them. Beyond that, I think most of it was covered by both Kate and Derek, but I think that's the only other element that I would add to that dynamic as well.
Okay, thank you. And I guess when you are looking for a partner, what are like the obvious key questions that an organization should be asking when researching a partner within the API space or any other tools required?
If is that question for myself, Megan?
Oh yes, sorry. Yep, yeah. I wanted to continue that train of thought.
Yeah, sure. I think the good thing to understand, as I mentioned before, is just understanding their strategy. Obviously, that's an important aspect of it. I think obviously looking at what Kate would have mentioned is understanding as well their roadmap. So what is their plan for development down the road? So you want to have an idea of what that looks like and how you could potentially contribute to that. Because obviously you don't want to integrate with an API or have an API that you're going to use for a long or extended period of time. And as they evolve their API, it diverges from what you are trying to do or deliver, and it doesn't run in line with that. So I think the most important thing is understanding the roadmap and understanding their direction. What we have done at IG typically is really speaking to other clients and customers who may have used those APIs that are from another vendor that we want to use, just to get some sort of real relevant history and context on how well it's performed. if it met their needs, if there were any challenges and drawbacks. And I think they're just simple questions or simple things you can ask in terms of vendor assessment to see whether or not that's going to be a good fit for you or not.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And yeah, Katrina, what are some of the key questions and considerations that you think are necessary when looking for a partner?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as I said before, I think it's all about understanding what use cases they cover, and primarily what prioritizes their future development if all of your use cases are not necessarily met. So how good can your partner relationship be? How much do they actually care about your end user? I think this is
Mhm.
really critical as well, and really shows, it sets apart the vendors who are there to innovate, and the ones who are not. So I think those are the top questions that I would recommend at the beginning.
Okay, thank you. And Derek, I mean, we kind of touched upon the importance of, future proofing. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of, what questions to ask, how you should approach the researching or due diligence phase of partner selection?
So I guess it's two ways for an incumbent, right? So if you've got a specific strategy you're trying to execute, then yeah, do a journey market fit with partners. So for example, we've got strategy to try and make customers happier about money. Now that can either be advice for how they invest, save and manage their money, or it could be how they save money. And we have a specific partnership with Go Compare, that kind of agnostic energy savings based on the customer's expenditure. Now that would be a strategic opportunity we see in the market, a product and customer journey fit, and then find the right partner that aligns with that roadmap, build the co-developed solution, and then also has the right API-based connections that we can work with. And then on the second piece, where it's a marketplace element, especially we want to challenge outside-in thinking. So provide open spaces where you collaborate, but you don't always go in with a defined answer. And that's the kind of the two models I would use as an incumbent, where you probably got a bit more options for how you try and innovate and find partners.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. So to finish up this panel, so once you've selected the right partners, you've established what a good API looks like, or any other tools, you have the best possible tools and APIs, and you've put together that truly digital experience. What's the best approach to testing and ensuring that this is really good to go prior to mass rollout? Quincy, I'll start with you, please.
Yeah, great question. I think, the first thing, and I would have touched on this earlier on in our conversation, is getting a deep understanding of obviously what you're trying to address and what the problem is you're trying to, address at the same time. And that happens through, going through a deep discovery process to really understand those pain points and what parts of that journey you're trying to personalize from the customer perspective. So I think that's the first starting point, and that's the foundation of where you start with that sort of journey. The second thing is, and as a product manager and professional, I think it's very important not to fall in love with your idea. And the reason behind that is you're going to go through several discussions with your end users and your customers that will allow you to iterate and change and pivot your product based on that feedback. And it's very easy to fall in love with an idea and keep wanting to go down the same direction, and not taking that feedback. So it's important that you're open and that you have the mindset that I may have a certain direction that I want to go down in terms of creating this API for my users, but in reality, the feedback that I'm getting is it's not really addressing the problem that I thought I sought out to address, and it may be something else. So I think that's very important. The other thing is you want to make sure that you have an MVP. So you're not going out with a full-blown, this is the API we've developed, we're now going to roll it out into market. You want to do iterative small tests just to make sure that it is hitting some of the points that you set out to do, and you're kind of validating your hypothesis along that journey. So really coming up with a very small or a minimal MVP product that you can really start testing and getting some feedback on in the market. And that incremental testing will be important for you to make those changes on the product. And then I think a lot of it will come down to just making sure that you have a long-term plan in terms of seeing what it is that your customers may want, or how that API is going to evolve in the future. And the reason why I say that is very easy, again, to develop an API, but you also need to be cognizant of further down the road, 6 months to 1 year, what are some of the potential roadmap changes that I want to make to that API? And do I make those code changes or develop in a way now that's going to allow me to implement some of those changes down the road without having to fully bake in those changes today? So I think it's important to have a long-term view and perspective of what you want to achieve down the road as well, to make sure that your APIs can obviously embrace some of those things when you reach that point of bringing it into the development cycle as well.
Cool. Okay, thanks for that, Quincy. Yeah, some really good insights on how to, weave in the customer expectation needs while also, simultaneously being aware of what the organizational needs are and the needs of the future. Derek, moving the question on to you. So yeah, what's the best approach to testing and, ensuring that everything's good to go prior to rollout?
Yes, but I think the answers to which are really good. So I'll try and kind of talk through something slightly different. So I think that piece of once you're then scaling the use and how you select the tests. So I think that's the piece of to do the technical proving. You want to get as close to really scaling and testing it at scale as possible. So I think what we've done, once you've passed discovery, done your MVP, we try and do these kind of different brand and percentage of customer deployments, run red, green, or blue-green deployments. You're running them side by side. You're testing auto scaling so that you're really way beyond what you think the use of the API. If you're successful, and we'll look at, this is probably the dull side, but in the back, and then how can you throttle demand? How can you ensure it doesn't impact the rest of your services? And testing really that scale, trying to do that proper simulation in a live environment before you release that and impact that. So there's things that we have in services that support things like the London Marathon and charity giving around that. And we can go from a 2-server use to hundreds of servers. And when you're connecting to different payment platforms, it's a way to be able to test that and the auto scaling to prove it. And when we talk about tooling and definitely uses of some of the public cloud providers, there's good kind of auto scaling options to take there. And I would really try and take APIs at scaling, double access, and prove out that it can. So that's what I need to do on the kind of tech side once you've got the kind of proving side on the MVP and the customer value.
Okay, thank you for that, Derek. Some good insights into the tech side of things. And lastly, Kat, what's your perspective? How are you testing, and what does that best in class experience looks like when it comes to testing prior to rollout?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so we're used to speed being a big factor in our feature roadmap. So I think, first of all, it depends on the stage of the company and what the investment is to get the feature live, and also the level of pain of the customer needing this feature. So, if it's a key strategic partnership, the level of pain for your customer is really, really high. They're really missing whatever it is that you're integrating, and it's a hygiene feature. Then the process would probably look slightly different. You'd probably already be starting to build a public waitlist to drive excitement. At the same time, you're investing in usability sessions, and you're using that waitlist to get the customers in to do the tests and give you feedback. So you're learning on the go, but in the background, development might have already started. And then I think once the V1 is live, beta testing, finding the small improvements and any bugs, like this is always key, no matter how quickly you need to get something out to customers. And throughout this whole time, you're driving momentum for a bigger launch with public announcements to customers. I think then on the other side, if it's more of an experiment and you're making a bet that this is a feature that will prove one of your hypotheses, then you have more time to invest in the discovery part. So finding out the customer's pain, and then learning at every phase. Is this something that we're prepared to move forward with the cost of implementation? And not saying definitely from the beginning, this is a yes, but learning at every phase and potentially being prepared to say no if something doesn't will work. So often in these types of releases, prototypes are used a lot. And then if it's still looking very promising, I still think it's super important to do a closed testing once it's implemented. Users sometimes change their behavior when they're using a product in real life versus on a prototype. So this is still super important. And here you can really learn about the real life use cases that customers need it for. And this helps to then build the story of why your customers, should use it. So for product marketing, you can really sell this once it's fully live.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So yeah, kind of the power of a closed testing environment and, being able to honestly review what you put together before it gets rolled out. So that concludes our panel. I'd like to thank Quincy, Derek, and Katrina for joining me. Really great insights from lots of different perspectives. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.